Korean Mafia boss walks into church for forgiveness, falls in love, unaware she's the pastor's daughter. The church doors swung open. Minho stepped inside, hands steady at his sides, the weight of a loaded gun pressed against his ribs beneath his coat. The evening light filtered through stained glass, casting fractured colors across empty pews. He wasn't here to pray. He was here to ask for forgiveness, from God, from himself, from the ghosts that followed him through Seoul's blood-soaked streets. But when he saw her standing near the altar, arranging white lilies with careful hands, something in his chest tightened in a way no bullet ever had. She turned, their eyes met. He didn't know her name yet. He didn't know she was the pastor's daughter. He didn't know that walking into this church would cost him everything. First time here, you're already in, stay close. The next story's already in motion. 3 months earlier, Minho sat in the private room of a Gangnam restaurant, watching steam rise from untouched tea. Across the low table, 3 men waited for him to speak. He didn't rush. Power wasn't loud, it was patient. "The shipment moves Thursday," he said finally. "Anyone who talks doesn't make it to Friday." The men nodded. They understood the language of consequence. Minho was 29 and controlled more of Seoul's underground trade routes than men twice his age. The tattoo on the side of his neck, a coiled dragon with no head, marked him as untouchable within certain circles. He'd earned that mark through strategy, not violence, though violence was always an option he kept sheathed like a blade. His phone buzzed. A message from his underboss, problem at the dock, American delegation asking questions. Minho's jaw tightened. Americans meant complications. Complications meant attention. Attention was the enemy of profit. "We're done here," he said, rising. The men scrambled to their feet, bowing as he left. The dock smelled like saltwater and diesel. Shipping containers stacked like steel mountains under floodlights. Minho's driver pulled up to the warehouse entrance where his underboss, Yi, stood with his arms crossed, blocking the door. "They're inside," Yi said. 3 of them, one woman doing all the talking. "What does she want?" "To verify the cargo manifest. Says there's a discrepancy in the documentation for a medical supply shipment." Minho's eyes narrowed. Medical supplies were his cleanest operation, the legitimate front that kept investigators off his back. If someone was digging there, they were either stupid or dangerously smart. "Let me see her," he said. Yi opened the door. She stood in the center of the warehouse, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 men in cheap suits who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. But she didn't look nervous. She looked focused, her dark eyes scanning inventory labels with the precision of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. She wore simple clothes, black pants, a white blouse, practical shoes. No jewelry except small gold earrings. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Everything about her presentation said, "I'm here to work, not impress." When she noticed him approaching, she didn't flinch. "You're the owner?" she asked. "I represent the owner," Minho said smoothly. His English was flawless, accent barely traceable. "Is there a problem?" "Your paperwork shows 200 units of insulin. Your shipment contains 197. Counting error or intentional misdirection." She held his gaze. 3 missing units could be diverted, sold on a secondary market, or it could be an honest mistake. I'm here to find out which. Minho studied her. Most people broke eye contact with him within seconds. She didn't. "What's your name?" he asked. "Amara Hayes. I work for the Humanitarian Oversight Committee. We audit medical supply chains to prevent fraud." "And you think I'm committing fraud?" "I think your numbers don't match your inventory. That's a fact, not an accusation." Smart. She wasn't giving him room to twist her words into something he could dismiss. "The missing units were damaged in transit," Minho said. "Destroyed per protocol. The revised manifest is being processed." "Then you won't mind if I verify the destruction logs." It wasn't a question. Minho glanced at Yi, who looked ready to escort her out by force if necessary. But force would raise more questions. Questions brought investigators. Investigators brought heat. Yi will provide the logs, Minho said. You'll have them by morning. Amara tilted her head slightly, as if weighing whether to push further. Then she nodded. Morning works, I'll be back at 9. She turned and walked out, her two colleagues trailing behind her like afterthoughts. Yi waited until the door closed. You want me to handle this? No, Minho's voice was quiet. I want you to make sure those logs are perfect, and I want to know everything about Amara Hayes by tonight. Because women who didn't flinch in his presence were either fearless or foolish, and he needed to know which. By midnight, Minho had her file spread across his desk. Born in Atlanta, moved to Seoul 8 months ago for work, degree in public health from Emory University, no criminal record, no suspicious associations, lived in a modest apartment in Itaewon, attended a small church in Yongsan every Sunday. Church. Minho stared at that detail longer than the others. He hadn't been inside a church since his mother's funeral 12 years ago. He'd stood in the back, 15 years old, watching strangers cry over a woman they barely knew while his father sat stone-faced in the front pew. 2 months later, his father was dead too, gunned down in a territorial dispute that Minho had spent the next decade avenging and consolidating into the empire he now controlled. He didn't believe in God, but he believed in debts, and the weight of his debts was getting heavier. The next morning, Amara returned at exactly 9. Yi handed her a folder containing fabricated destruction logs, meticulous forgeries that would survive any external audit. Minho watched from the office window above the warehouse floor as she reviewed each page, her pen moving across the paper in precise checkmarks. She looked up, directly at the window where he stood. Their eyes met through the glass. She didn't smile, neither did he. Then she closed the folder and left. We're clear, Yi asked. For now. But Minho couldn't shake the feeling that Amara Hayes wasn't done with him. Over the next 3 weeks, she kept appearing. Not at the docks, her audit there had closed, but in places adjacent to his operations. A hospital that received his medical supply donations, a community health clinic funded by his shell corporation, a charity dinner where he made a carefully calculated appearance to maintain his legitimate businessman facade. She never approached him directly, but she was always there watching. One night, Minho's patience snapped. He found her leaving the health clinic in Yongsan after hours, walking alone down a poorly lit street. His car pulled alongside her. The window rolled down. Get in, he said. Amara stopped, looked at him. No. I'm not asking. Then you're wasting your time. She kept walking. Minho got out of the car and matched her pace. You've been following me. I've been doing my job. Your job ended 3 weeks ago. My job is never finished when the numbers don't feel right. Feel? Minho moved in front of her, blocking her path. You audit based on feelings now. Amara met his eyes. I audit based on patterns, and you have a pattern, Mr. Kang. She'd learned his real name. That meant she'd been digging deeper than surface records. What pattern is that? Generosity that's too convenient. Donations that arrive exactly when scrutiny increases. A business model that's profitable but not quite profitable enough to justify your lifestyle. She paused. You're good at covering tracks, but you're not perfect. Minho's hand twitched toward the gun he always carried. Not to use, just to remind himself it was there. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she stood her ground. Maybe it was the fact that she was right. If you're so certain I'm dirty, he said quietly, why haven't you reported me? Because certainty and proof are different things, and because, she hesitated. For the first time he saw her guard slip, because I don't think you're beyond saving. The words hit him harder than any accusation. "You don't know me," Minho said. "No, but I know men like you. I've seen what desperation looks like, what guilt looks like. You carry both." She stepped around him and continued walking. Minho stood in the street, watching her disappear into the darkness, and felt something crack open inside his chest, something he'd buried 12 years ago under concrete and blood. The next Sunday, he went to church. He told himself it was reconnaissance. He needed to understand what made Amara Hayes tick, what leverage he could use if she became a real problem. That's what he told himself. But when he stepped through those doors and saw her standing near the altar, arranging white lilies with careful hands, he knew he was lying. She looked up, saw him. Her eyes widened not with fear but surprise. Minho walked down the center aisle, acutely aware of how out of place he looked in this sacred space. His coat concealed the gun he always carried. His tattoo marked him as something this place rejected. But he kept walking until he stood in front of her. "I came to apologize," he said. It wasn't the lie he'd planned. It was the truth that escaped before he could stop it. Amara set down the lilies. "For what?" "For making you feel like you had to watch me. For being exactly what you thought I was." "And what do you think I thought you were?" "Dangerous, corrupt, beyond saving." She studied his face for a long moment. "I said you weren't beyond saving. I didn't say you weren't dangerous." "Is there a difference?" "Yes," her voice softened. "One means there's still hope." Minho didn't know what to say to that. He'd spent 12 years building walls around hope, sealing it away where it couldn't betray him. Footsteps echoed from the back of the church. An older man in pastor's robes emerged from a side door, carrying a stack of hymnals. He saw Minho and smiled. "Welcome," the pastor said. "First time visiting us?" "Yes." "Well, you're welcome here. Service starts in an hour, but you're free to sit and reflect if you'd like." The pastor's eyes were kind, unguarded. He had no idea who Minho was. Amara glanced between them, something unreadable crossing her face. "Dad, this is," she paused. "This is Mr. Kang. He's considering attending service." "Dad." The word landed like a gunshot. Minho's entire body went rigid. He looked at Amara, then at the pastor, then back at Amara. The pieces clicked together with brutal clarity. She was the pastor's daughter. The woman who'd been investigating him, challenging him, seeing through his carefully constructed lies. She was the daughter of the man now looking at him with open, trusting kindness. And Minho had walked straight into a trap he'd set for himself. Minho sat through the entire service in the back pew, barely hearing a word. His mind was racing through calculations. If Amara was the pastor's daughter, her presence in Seoul wasn't random. The church likely had connections to the humanitarian organization she worked for, which meant her audits weren't just professional, they were personal. She believed in this work the way her father believed in salvation. That made her more dangerous than any investigator. After the service, Minho slipped out before anyone could approach him, but 2 days later he found himself back at the church. And the day after that, each time Amara was there. Each time they didn't speak, just exchanged glances that said too much. On the 5th visit, she finally confronted him in the parking lot. "Why do you keep coming back?" she asked. "I don't know." "That's not good enough." Minho looked at her, really looked at her. In the evening light, her face held the same certainty that had first caught his attention at the warehouse, but now he saw something else beneath it, worry. "Are you worried about me?" he asked. "I'm worried about what you want from my father." "I don't want anything from him." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between them like a blade. "I want to know what it feels like," Minho said quietly, "to walk into a place and not be afraid of what I've done, to sit in a room full of people and not calculate who might betray me, to hear someone talk about forgiveness and actually believe it's possible." Amara's expression shifted. The suspicion didn't disappear, but it made room for something else. Forgiveness is possible, she said, but it requires truth, and you're still lying. About what? About why you're really here. Minho stepped closer, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. You think I'm here to hurt your father. I think you're here because you saw an opening, a weakness you could exploit. You're right, he didn't blink. I am here because I saw a weakness, but it's not your father. Understanding dawned on her face, then anger. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't make this about me. Don't pretend this is anything other than strategy. It was strategy. Minho's voice dropped. 3 weeks ago it was strategy. 2 weeks ago it was reconnaissance. But right now, standing here, lying to you feels worse than any sin I've committed. Amara shook her head. You don't get to do this. You don't get to walk into my life, into my father's church, and act like you're some wounded soul looking for redemption. I know what you are. Then why haven't you exposed me? The question stopped her. Because exposing you would destroy the medical supply chain, she said finally. Your dirty money funds clean operations, hospitals, clinics. People who need insulin and antibiotics don't care where the money comes from. If I burn you, they suffer. So I'm stuck tolerating a criminal because taking you down would hurt innocent people. That's not the only reason. Don't. You haven't exposed me because part of you wants to believe I can change. Amara's hands clenched into fists. You don't know what I want. Then tell me I'm wrong. She couldn't, and her silence was the most honest thing between them. Mean you took a risk. Have dinner with me. No. Not a date, a conversation about what happens next. What happens next is you leave my father's church and never come back. I can't do that. Why not? Because I'm not ready to give up hope yet. The word hope seemed to physically hurt her. She stepped back, creating distance. One dinner, she said, public place, 1 hour, and if you can't give me the truth, we're done. They met at a small restaurant in Idiwan neutral territory. Minho arrived first, chose a table in the corner where he could see all exits, old habits. When Amara arrived, she sat across from him with her arms crossed. Talk, she said. What do you want to know? Everything you've hidden. Minho leaned back. That would take more than an hour. Then start with why you really came to the church. He could have lied, should have lied, but something about the way she looked at him, not with fear but with expectation, made the truth feel necessary. My mother used to take me to church, he said. Every Sunday. I hated it. I didn't understand why we had to sit still and listen to stories about people who'd been dead for thousands of years. But she said it wasn't about the stories. It was about remembering that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. Amara's expression softened slightly. She died when I was 15, Minho continued. Cancer, fast and brutal. I prayed every night for God to save her. He didn't, so I stopped praying, stopped believing, started building something I could control. Your empire. My survival. He met her eyes. I came to your father's church because I wanted to remember what it felt like to believe in something. And then I saw you, and I realized I'd been lying to myself about what I was really looking for. Which was someone who could see what I'd become and still think I was worth saving. The words settled between them like stones. Amara was quiet for a long time. Then she said, My father talks about redemption like it's simple, like all you have to do is ask for forgiveness and mean it. But it's not that simple, is it? No. Because asking for forgiveness means admitting what you've done, and you've done things that can't be forgiven. Yes. So what do you want from me, Minho? It was the first time she'd used his first name. It felt intimate and dangerous. I want you to tell me if it's possible, he said. If someone like me can actually change, or if I'm wasting both our time pretending. Amara looked down at her hands. I don't know, I want to believe people can change. I've seen it happen. But I've also seen people use redemption as a costume, something they wear when it's convenient. How do you tell the difference? Time, consistency, whether they're willing to sacrifice something real. What would I have to sacrifice? She looked up. Everything you've built, all of it, the power, the money, the control, because you can't serve two masters. You can't hold onto your empire and claim you want salvation. The truth of it hit him like ice water. That's what you meant, Minho said slowly, when you said I wasn't beyond saving. You meant I could be saved, but only if I'm willing to lose everything. Yes. They sat in silence. The restaurant buzzed around them. Laughter, clinking dishes, the ordinary sounds of people living ordinary lives. Minho had spent 12 years making sure his life would never be ordinary. And now, this woman was asking him to give it all up for the possibility of something he didn't even believe in. I can't do that, he said. Amara nodded, I know. But I can't walk away from you either. Then we're at an impasse. Unless there's a middle ground. There isn't, her voice was firm. You don't get to keep your kingdom and your conscience. That's not how it works. Minho wanted to argue, wanted to find the loophole, the compromise, the strategic solution that let him have both. But looking at Amara's face, the sadness and certainty written there, he knew she was right. I should go, she said, standing. Wait. She paused. If I tried, Minho said, if I actually tried to walk away from all of it, would you help me? Amara's eyes searched his face. Are you asking me that because you mean it, or because you think it's what I want to hear? I don't know anymore. Then you're not ready. She left. Minho sat alone at the table, staring at his reflection in the window. He looked like a stranger. The next week unraveled everything. Someone leaked information about Minho's operations to a rival organization. Shipments were intercepted. Safe houses were raided. 3 of his men disappeared. And at the center of the chaos was a single, undeniable fact. The leak had come from inside. Yi brought him the evidence. Communications traced back to an encrypted phone found in one of their warehouses. The phone had been used to send detailed reports about Minho's movements, shipments, and vulnerabilities. Who had access? Minho asked. Only inner circle, people you trust. Trust, the word felt like a weapon. Minho spent 2 days narrowing down the list. Then he found the name that made his blood run cold. The encrypted phone belonged to someone who joined his operation 8 months ago. Someone positioned perfectly to observe without suspicion. Someone who'd been asking questions about his legitimate businesses. Someone who worked for a humanitarian oversight committee. It couldn't be. But when he pulled the phone records, he found calls to a number he recognized. Amara's number. His office felt like it was closing in. Minho stared at the evidence spread across his desk and tried to find an explanation that didn't destroy him. But the facts were clear. Amara Hayes hadn't been auditing him. She'd been infiltrating him. Everything, the questions, the church, the dinner, the confession about redemption, had been strategy. She'd played him perfectly, made him vulnerable, made him hope. And now his empire was collapsing, because he'd been stupid enough to trust someone who'd never trusted him. Minho picked up his phone and called her. She answered on the second ring. Minho. We need to talk now. What's wrong? You tell me. There was a pause, then quietly, where? The church, 1 hour. He hung up. Minho arrived first. The church was empty, dark except for a few candles burning near the altar. He stood in the center aisle, his hand resting on the gun beneath his coat, and waited. When Amara arrived, she looked afraid. Good she should be. Minho. Don't. He pulled out his phone and showed her the evidence. Explain this. She looked at the screen. Her face went pale. I can explain. Then do it fast. That's not my phone. It called your number 6 times in the last month. Yes, because, she stopped, took a breath. Because my father hired someone to keep tabs on you. He didn't trust you. He thought you were dangerous. So he asked someone from my organization to monitor your operations and report back. Your father, Minyo's voice was flat. The pastor, the man who welcomed me with open arms, he set me up. He was protecting me. From what? From you, Amara's voice cracked. He saw the way you looked at me. He knew you were dangerous. And he was right, wasn't he? Look at yourself. You came here with a gun because you think I betrayed you. Minyo's hand moved away from the weapon. You knew. This whole time, you knew someone was feeding information to my enemies, and you didn't tell me. I didn't know it would lead to this. I didn't know they'd go after your men. I thought, she stopped. I thought if my father had enough evidence, he could convince you to leave the life, to actually change. By destroying everything I built. Yes. The honesty of it was brutal. So all of it was a lie, Minho said. The dinners, the questions about redemption, making me think I could be saved. No, Amara stepped closer. That was real, I meant every word. But you were still working against me. I was trying to save you from yourself. Minho laughed, a hollow, broken sound. You don't get it. You can't save someone by destroying them first. That's not salvation, that's execution. I'm sorry. Don't, he turned away, just don't. Behind him, he heard footsteps. More than one person. He spun around, hand on his gun, and saw Pastor Hayes emerge from the shadows with 2 men Minho recognized as church elders. Mr. Kang, the pastor said, I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Minyo's finger brushed the trigger. Stay back. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to offer you a choice. What choice? Walk away from your operations, turn over your assets, cooperate with the authorities, or, the pastor's voice was calm but firm, I release everything we've gathered to the police. Your empire ends either way, but you get to choose whether it ends with you in prison or with you free. Minho looked at Amara. You knew about this too. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I tried to stop him. I told him you deserved a chance to choose on your own, but he wouldn't listen. Because I know men like you, the pastor said. You don't choose redemption when you have options. You choose it when you have none. Minyo's entire world narrowed to this moment. 12 years of blood, strategy, and survival collapsing into 2 choices, prison or surrender. He thought about his mother, about the prayers she'd whispered over him, about the hope Amara had briefly made him believe in. Then he thought about the men who died for his empire, the families he'd destroyed, the weight of debts he could never repay. If I walk away, Minho said slowly, what happens to the medical supplies, the clinics, the people who depend on that funding? The pastor looked genuinely surprised. That's what you're worried about. Answer the question. We'll find other funding, clean funding. That takes time. People will die waiting. That's not your responsibility anymore. Yes, it is. Minyo's voice hardened. It's been my responsibility since I started this. You think you can just flip a switch and replace what I built. You don't understand how any of this works. Then help us understand, Amara said. Work with us. Show us how to transition the legitimate operations without hurting anyone. Minho looked at her, at the desperation in her eyes, at the impossible hope she still carried. And he made his choice. I'll do it, he said. I'll walk away. I'll cooperate, but on one condition. What? The pastor asked. I get 6 months to transition everything, to make sure the medical supply chains don't collapse, to protect the people who depend on them. And during those 6 months, you leave my men alone. No arrests, no raids, just time. The pastor looked at the elders. They whispered among themselves. 3 months, the pastor said finally. 5. 4. And you start dismantling immediately. Minho nodded. Deal. He turned to Amara. I need you to oversee the transition, make sure it's done right. Why would you trust me? Because you're the only person who's seen both sides of what I am, the monster and the man, and because, his voice dropped, because I still believe you meant it when you said I wasn't beyond saving. Amara's tears fell harder. I do. Then prove it, help me do this right. Over the next 4 months, Minho dismantled his empire piece by piece. He turned over assets, burned bridges, severed connections that had taken years to build. Every day felt like dying slowly. But every day Amara was there, checking numbers, verifying transfers, making sure the legitimate operations survived the collapse. They didn't talk much during that time. The betrayal sat between them like a wall, but they worked together with the efficiency of people who understood each other's patterns. On the final day, Minho signed the last document transferring control of his medical supply operations to a coalition of humanitarian organizations. His empire was gone. He was officially nothing. Amara set down her pen. It's done. Yes. What will you do now? Minho looked out the window at Seoul, the city he'd controlled, the city that no longer needed him. I don't know, he said honestly. Start over maybe, find out who I am without all of this. But you'll need help. Are you offering? She hesitated. I don't know if I can after everything that happened. The lies, the manipulation, even if it was for the right reasons. I understand. But I want to. Her voice cracked. I want to believe we could build something real, something that isn't based on strategy or survival. We can't. Minho's voice was gentle but final. Too much damage, too much history. You'll always wonder if I'm using you. I'll always wonder if you're watching me. That's not trust. That's surveillance. Amara closed her eyes. I'm sorry. Me too. She left. Minho sat alone in the empty office and felt the weight of his choices settle over him like concrete. 2 weeks later, new information surfaced. The leaked phone records that had exposed Minho's operations hadn't just come from the church's investigation. Someone else had been feeding information to both sides, manipulating everyone to force a confrontation that would destroy Minho's empire and discredit the pastor's church. The person responsible was revealed to be one of Minho's former rivals, someone who'd been waiting years for an opportunity to strike. They'd used Amara's father's legitimate concerns as cover for their own revenge. When Minho learned the truth, he felt nothing. No anger, no vindication, just exhaustion. He called Amara. Did you hear? Yes. We were both played. I know. Silence stretched between them. Does it change anything? She asked. No, Minho said. The damage is still real. The betrayal still happened. Knowing there was another hand on the knife doesn't make the wound heal faster. What now? Now I disappear, start over somewhere else, become someone who doesn't carry this weight. And us? There is no us, Amara. There never really was. Just two people who wanted to believe in something that was impossible from the start. He heard her breath catch. I wish it had been different. So do I. Minho hung up. He left Seoul 3 days later. No goodbye to the church. No final confrontation. Just a quiet exit, the kind that leaves ghosts behind. Amara stood in the church parking lot where they'd had their first real conversation and felt the absence of him like a missing limb. Her father found her there. You're better off without him. Am I? He was dangerous, you know that. He was also trying, really trying, and we destroyed him for it. We saved him. No, Amara's voice was hollow. We broke him, there's a difference. The pastor had no answer to that. Months passed. Amara continued her work auditing medical supply chains. She saw the operations Minho had built, now running cleaner, safer, but somehow less efficient. The ruthless precision he'd brought to everything was gone, replaced by bureaucratic caution. People still received their insulin and antibiotics, but the margins were tighter, the responses slower. Sometimes she wondered if they'd made the right choice, if destroying one kind of corruption to prevent another was worth the cost. She never heard from Minho again. But late at night, she'd remember the way he'd looked at her in the church that first time, like she was both his salvation and his destruction. And she'd realize she'd been both. They'd broken each other trying to save each other. And now they were both ghosts, haunting the spaces where hope used to live. What started as a calculated plan turned into a dangerous game, and in the final moments, everyone must face the consequences of their actions. Trust is broken, and lives are shattered forever. Would you risk everything for a forbidden love? Would you choose loyalty or the truth that could ruin you? And that's where we leave our story. But is it really over? What do you think happens next for Minho and Amara? Will they find redemption or face even more challenges? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. And let me know if you want to see part 2. Let's keep the story going. Comment below and share your ideas for what could happen next. I love reading your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.